It's OPB Politics Now for Friday, September 15th. Labor Day is behind us, and for us political nerds, that means election season has started. Yes, it is still more than a year away, but people are making moves. Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler announced he's not running for re-election, and well-connected Oregon Democrats are lining up for the open statewide seats. Today, we'll give you a rundown on which political players are in the mix and talk about what is at stake. Welcome to the podcast. I'm OPB Politics reporter Lauren Dake.
I'm City of Portland reporter Alex Zielinski.
And I'm politics reporter Dirk, VanderHart.
Alex, let's start with the biggest news of the week. Ted Wheeler is not seeking a third term as mayor in 2024. Wheeler was first elected in 2017, re-elected in 2020, and his tenure was tough. We all know what happened, but I'll just say it anyway. There was the global pandemic, the protests, rising homelessness. And he's been rather open about his dissatisfaction with the job in the past. So I guess I'm not totally surprised he's not going to try for another term. Is that fair?
Yeah, people inside and outside City Hall all sensed Wheeler wasn't gunning for a third term, so it's not a huge surprise. And you're right, it's not been an easy 6 years for Wheeler. He faced all of those crises you mentioned and became a punching bag of both the left and the right. He was regularly heckled at public events. He was a focus of a number of negative memes, and he was cyberbullied by former President Donald Trump. On top of all of this, he was tear gassed by federal police while trying to make a stand against Trump. I was standing next to him at the time, and I can tell you it wasn't a normal photo op. Here's how he described his job at a press conference earlier this week.
Just serving in public office right now is humbling. It's not for the faint of heart. People have strong opinions. We're divided as a nation. We're divided oftentimes as a community. And you ask 10 people what's the right way to address the homeless crisis, you'll get 10 different answers.
Another thing that's really at play here is the City of Portland government is really at the beginning of a very major overhaul. How much do you think that factored into his political decision?
Well, according to him, it's a big reason why he chose to opt out of the race. So Portland is expected to switch over to this entirely different form of government in 2025. And while there are city staff in charge of kind of orchestrating the nitty-gritty details, city council and the mayor play a pretty big role in making sure everything is set up for the incoming council in 2025. And part of that is overseeing a transfer of power, which is the handoff of city bureaus from council members to a new city administrator. And if Wheeler was running for mayor, any decision he would make around how the future government should operate could look like a political power grab. And he said he'd be more effective as just a neutral player.
I think I can be seen as more of an honest mediator, an honest broker, if you will, in this process if I've got nothing at stake politically, because I don't. I'm just focused on solutions.
He said he wants to appoint an interim city manager as soon as possible to take over control of city bureaus, and then let the new city council appoint a permanent one next year.
So as he just pointed out in that cut, he's going to be a lame duck mayor. Do you think that could possibly help his ability to make some real changes in the time that he has remaining?
Yeah, by all accounts, it should make it easier for him to make some ambitious policy changes, since he won't be catering to future voters or donors. Previous mayors, like Charlie Hales, used their lame duck year to push through some big and controversial items. For instance, 4 months after Hales announced he wouldn't seek a second term, he announced a plan to allow unhoused Portlanders to sleep on sidewalks and other city property without being swept. And that was wildly unpopular in the business community, who eventually sued to stop the initiative. But some parts of that policy remained, and it could have been a lot harder for them to get through City Hall if Hales was seeking re-election. I spoke with a number of local policy advocates and City Hall kind of insiders yesterday about the opportunity Wheeler has to do something big before leaving office. And I heard a lot of ideas from getting him to crack down harder on illegal drug sales, to rectifying the city's relationship with the county, to improve the way they address homelessness. Others think Wheeler would probably just be best to stay on the course he is now, to tie up the projects he began in recent years around homelessness and crime, and not try anything new. But there's a lot you can do with 15 months.
Dirk, I remember during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic when we were both watching this press conference with Wheeler and former Governor Kate Brown, and the two of them were just openly quarreling with each other. We ended up writing about that and how they were so clearly not getting along. Do you think that Wheeler and now Governor Tina Kotek have a better relationship? And do you think that's helped the city or the state at all?
I mean, there is always a lot that goes on behind the scenes, right? Part of the Wheeler-Brown thing that was so interesting is they were, in some cases, issuing press releases calling each other out on a daily basis. With Kotek and Wheeler, they are new in this specific relationship. There's not been a lot of time to develop it. I mean, Brown would be mad that Wheeler would come to her during the pandemic and demand things and just expect that the governor's office would be at his beck and call. That's at least as her staffers described it. Kotek obviously is a different politician. And I have to say, she has seemed a little more the aggressor at times in the relationship so far. She has spent a lot of time in office, very publicly disappointed in the direction Portland's taking. I mean, as we've talked about on the podcast, maybe that's been most clear in Kotek developing this task force to address the problems of downtown. She apparently did that with very little notice to Wheeler's office. She is co-chairing it. He's just a member. It's kind of not clear what shakes out, but there is a long time to go, 15 months in Wheeler's tenure. They will certainly grow and grow apart or grow together in some way.
Maybe they'll become besties.
Maybe.
We'll see. Mayor Wheeler has been around a very long time. He was born and raised in the city. He served as Multnomah County Chair and State Treasurer before becoming mayor. It's no secret he had also really hoped to be governor of the state one day. That is most likely not going to happen now. What do you guys think his future holds, and what do you think his legacy will be?
Yeah, there's really no telling what his future holds at this point. Like you said, he once had his eye on the governor's office, but that feels way more of a long shot after his tenure in Portland. What he said is that he wants to spend more time with his daughter, who is a senior in high school, and we'll see where that goes. As for his legacy, that's really hard to say at this point. In the near term, I think he'll be remembered for the flack he got from all sides, a punching bag, like I said before, but also will be remembered for just sticking around to see through some of the city's most tumultuous years. He is the only mayor in nearly 20 years to seek and win a second term. And that second term was won in 2020, a year that arguably everyone wanted to check out of. Dirk, what do you think?
I mean, Wheeler right now, if he leaves office today, right, he is leaving a city that is, by pretty much any measure, worse off than when he began. That is obviously not all his fault, as he would be first to tell you. But in politics, politicians are not always judged by history for everything that was their fault or wasn't. It's also absolutely no question that he has struggled to be effective. But I just do feel like you do, Alex. This is too soon to say. He has 15 months. You mentioned Charlie Hales doing some of the boldest steps of his mayoral tenure after he announced he wasn't going to run. So there might be some life in Wheeler left in terms of rescuing or improving his image after the fact. And I also have to say that often I think legacies are shaped not right after someone's done with office, but far down the line. So if we have a mayor next that is an absolute train wreck, maybe people look back fondly on the Wheeler days, or maybe we had a great mayor next and they really kind of pull the city up, and maybe Wheeler looks a little shabbier by comparison. I think it's too soon to say.
Well, let's pivot to some of the big statewide seats that are going to be open in November 2024. A lot of familiar people are hoping to serve as the state's next treasurer or the state's next secretary of state. Since we were just talking about Wheeler, the former state treasurer, Dirk, let's start with the treasurer seat. Who is eyeing this seat?
Sure. So the most noteworthy candidate who announced her intentions this week is Senator Elizabeth Steiner. She is a Portland Democrat. She's been a lawmaker in the Senate for around a dozen years. And she is pretty much without question one of the most powerful lawmakers in Salem. That's because she's the co-chair of the Joint Ways and Means Committee. That's a long way of saying she basically writes the budget or has a big hand in writing the budget. Billions of dollars are spent every other year, and she's got a big hand in where they go. But she is now saying she wants to trade in that job for one that is, I would say, a little more or a lot more behind the scenes. So, state treasurer is important. It issues bonds for the state. It plays a role in managing the state's investments, which is hugely important for pensioners, for instance. It leads on these initiatives like helping people save for college for their kids or helping people save for retirement. But it is certainly not as powerful or maybe as noteworthy to people that watch Oregon politics as the budget chair. Steiner says it's a logical step to take, and she's looking forward to the race. There are a couple other names in the race, sort of. So there's a businessman named Brett Baker. He's registered a PAC to run for this. He is not registered as a candidate yet, and it's not clear from some of his fundraising whether or not he's going to pursue a race. He's refunded a lot of the money he's gotten to date. And maybe more interestingly, there's a guy named Jeff Goodman, who for the last 2 races for treasurer has been the Republican nominee. He now says he's switched his party affiliation to Democrat and is maybe going to take on Steiner in the Democratic primary. Given her connections with the Democratic Party and his history with the Republican Party, that could be a pretty tough sell.
Another seat that opened up, and this one opened up unexpectedly, is the Secretary of State seat. Former Secretary of State Shemia Fagan resigned amid a scandal earlier this year, which opened up this very coveted position in our state government.
Right. So Fagan is out. We all know the story there. Most of us do. Her replacement, LaVon Griffin-Valade, is not running next year. So we've got an open seat. And, I feel like we've recited Secretary of State duties a lot on this podcast this year. But just to recap, they oversee elections. They audit government agencies. They run the archives. They deal with business registration. The Secretary of State is a prominent seat in Oregon, in part because it is second in line to the governor. So they take over if the governor steps down. For instance, in 2015, when Governor John Kitzhaber did and Kate Brown took office. It's also just been a stepping stone to the governor's office. So think of Tom McCall or Mark Hatfield or Barbara Roberts. All of them served as Secretary of State prior to being governor. It's just got that kind of heft in the state.
So who has announced that they are running for this seat?
We have 2 pretty well-connected politicians that are running at this point. Tobias Reed, the current state treasurer, has been signaling for weeks he was going to do this. He formally announced this week. He is probably the more recognizable name to voters. He's the state treasurer, as I said. He's a longtime lawmaker before that. He ran for governor, so he's run these statewide races and maybe has had his name in front of people. He's also clearly had his eye on higher office for some time. As I mentioned, he ran for governor last year. Now he's saying he wants to restore trust in the Secretary of State and protect elections. Also running in this is someone that surprised some people. It's Senator James Manning. He is a Eugene Democrat, former Army officer, has been in the legislature since about 2016. And he's also one of the highest ranking senators. He's the Senate President pro tem, meaning he's backup for Senate President Rob Wagner. Like I said, some people were surprised by Manning's announcement this week, but he says Secretary is in line with his interests, and he also wants to restore trust and protect elections. Both these guys like each other, or say they like each other a lot. So this might not be the most sharp-elbowed primary we've ever seen, but it should be interesting. On the Republican side, we haven't seen anyone throw in for Secretary of State, though many Democrats believe Christine Drazan, the former Republican nominee for governor, might do so. She has not given any inkling publicly that she's thinking about it.
That would be interesting. There is another statewide race on the ballot next year. What do we know right now about the Attorney General's race?
We don't know a lot. So the big question for weeks or even months is whether Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum is going to run. She's had the office for 12 years. She would pretty much be a lock, many people think, if she ran for re-election. But she hasn't made any announcement. That has not stopped people from getting ready for a potential retirement. We know that there's one Republican candidate, Will Lathrop. He's a former deputy DA in a couple counties. He's been raising money at a pretty good clip, and he actually has some staff crossover with Drazan's gubernatorial campaign last year. And then there's several Dems who've been rumored to be looking into this. I think most prominently, a lot of people are saying Dan Rayfield's name, the House Speaker. He has not said anything publicly about whether or not he's going to run. As an incumbent, as I mentioned, Rosenblum would have a good chance. If she steps down, this could be a pretty interesting race because people are really concerned about crime right now. That will absolutely be a part of any campaign we see. So could be interesting. We are just waiting to hear from the Attorney General on what her plans are.
Let's leave the conversation here for the day. The good news is we will be back soon with more political coverage. Alex, Dirk, thanks for joining me. This week's episode was produced by Andrew Thien. Our audio engineer is Stephen Cray. Our music comes from Audio Network. We will be back next week with more political news from across the Pacific Northwest. Until then, you can find all of OPB's reporting at opb.org.